Cave of Hira. The angel came to him in it and asked him to read. The prophet replied, I do not know how to read. The angel caught me forcefully and pressed me so hard that I could not bear it anymore. He then released me and asked me to read. And I replied, I do not know how to read. Whereupon he caught me again and pressed me a second time until I could not bear it anymore. Then he released me and asked me again to read. But again I replied, I do not know how to read. Or, what shall I read? Thereupon he caught me for the third time and pressed me and then released me and said, read in the name of your Lord, who has created all that exists. He has created man from a clot. Read, and your Lord is most generous, up to that which he knew not. Then Muhammad returned with the inspiration, his neck muscles twitching with terror, till he entered upon Khadijah and said, cover me, cover me. They covered him till his fear was over. And then he said, O Khadijah, what is wrong with me? Then he told her everything that had happened and said, I fear that something may happen to me. Khadijah said, never, but have the glad tidings, for by Allah, Allah will never disgrace you, as you keep good relations with your kin and kith. Speak the truth, help the poor and the destitute, serve your guests generously, and assist the deserving, calamity-afflicted ones. Khadijah then accompanied him to her cousin Waraqah bin Nawfal bin Asad bin Abdul Uzza, long name, who during the pre-Islamic period became a Christian and used to write the writing with Hebrew letters. He would write from the gospel in Hebrew as much as Allah wished him to write. He was an old man and had lost his weight. Khadijah said to Waraqah, listen to the story of your nephew, O my cousin. Waraqah said, O my nephew, what have you seen? Allah's apostle described whatever he had seen. Waraqah said, this is the same one who keeps the secrets, Angel Gabriel, whom Allah has sent to Moses. I wish I were young and could live up to the time where your people would turn you out. Muhammad asked, will they drive me out? Waraqah replied in the affirmative and said, anyone, man, who came with something similar to what you have brought was treated with hostility. And if I should remain alive till the day when you will be turned out, then I would support you strongly. But after a few days, Waraqah died, and the divine inspiration was also paused for a while. And the prophet became so sad, as we have heard, that he intended several times to throw himself from the tops of high mountains. And every time he went up to the top of a mountain in order to throw himself down, Gabriel would appear before him and say, O Muhammad, you are indeed Allah's apostle in truth. Whereupon his heart will become quiet and he will calm down and will return home. And whenever the period of the calming of the inspiration used to become long, he would do as before. But when he used to reach the top of a mountain, Gabriel would appear before him and say to him what he has said before. There are a number of slight variations to this story, related by different people, describing Muhammad's visitation by a spirit, identifying himself as the angel Gabriel. These stories do not always agree with each other in perfect detail, but on the whole, a complete picture can be drawn of Muhammad's initial experience with the spirit and his reactions after. And that's what I just presented. From this encounter, Muslims believe that Allah, through the Archangel Gabriel, gave the collection of revelations to Muhammad that are now preferred as the Islamic scriptures.
Shalom, 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 family. As always, at the 10-minute mark, let us say the Lord's Prayer. Shalom, peace, and blessings. Happy Sabbath, shalom, family. A day to sit and reflect on the Messiah. So let's pray. Our Father in heaven, honored be thy name. May thy kingdom come. May thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us each day our daily bread, and forgive us of our trespasses as forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us on a righteous path, and guard us from evil one. In your name we pray. Amen. Amen, amen, family. Shalom, shalom. So we're going to be talking about two things today. So usually on Synthetic Sundays, we usually talk about some very deep stuff, but I'm going to talk about something very deep today. But the first thing, before we do that, as always, on the Sabbath days, we want to first talk about Revelation. So I'm going to do a quick 20-minute summary of Revelation, just to get a nice summary in. And then I just want to talk about this interesting mystery. Now, the reason why I'm going to talk about this interesting mystery is because I'll get to it when we get to that mystery. It's very interesting what's being looked at nowadays. So first, Revelation. This note will be in the description. This note is that Evernote that's usually added every Sabbath day. And this Evernote is obviously because there is no fear in love. This is actually to bring the true understanding of what is in Revelation, as I think it is very, very, very hermetic when you understand Revelation, Genesis, and, in the center of the Bible. As is precept upon precept, line upon line, here a little and there a little. Today, I'm going to jump right to the sixth seal. So the sixth seal is actually what we are waiting for. We're actually waiting for the events that occur at the sixth seal. Be careful of Seventh-day Adventist ideas. The Seventh-day Adventists say this already came, but this is actually the day of the Lord. This represents the day of the Lord when the Lord begins to work. That's important to know because the details in the sixth seal is undeniable. Next week, we'll get right into a deep conversation on these things and read through this whole note. So today will just be a summary. So in the sixth seal, one of the main things that we know is the day of the Lord, because the day of the Lord is always matching with three elements. First, it talks about destruction. That's one of the major things about the day of the Lord, where the Lord is lifted up, but everyone's humbled down. We also can see that in the fall on us. We can also know that it's the day of the Lord because we actually see at this time, right before the moment of the seventh seal and then the trumpets, we know that it will say at the time when the 144,000 are sealed, it tells us that, right? It says this saying, I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of God, the seal of the living God, and he cried with a loud voice, hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. This is very important because this lets us know that the Lord himself, when he gets the chance to lift up his hands and start to work and actually start to bring judgment on the earth, it's important to know that he seals his servants. He seals his servants. And then he also sends this holy fire down from a holy altar that the replica on earth was so holy, but the one in heaven is even more holy. He's going to pour that out as well at a certain season. Now, also another element that we notice the day of the Lord is the saying, the sun. You know how Christ says it, and many other scriptures say about the sky, the signs of the sky, right? The moon become as blood and the sun become black. All those things. You see that in a lot of different sayings where he says, the stars of heaven shall fall and the powers of heaven shall be shaken. And he talks about those things where he says, the obviously sun shall be darkened and the moon shall not give her light. In some other places, you'll see it says the moon turned to blood and everything. That's actually talking about the day of the Lord. That's actually the sixth seal. So that's actually going to be the start of all the events that unfold in Revelation. What comes after that? And remember, this is a summary. So next is going to be the seventh seal. Seventh seal, that's going to be where the power is given. That's what I was talking about. Before the Lord brings the beast and the destruction of those things, there's going to be power given. Because what's going to happen is going to be on another level. That's very important to know. Then comes the trumpets. Long story short, the first four are warnings. The first four are warnings. After the first four comes the woes. The woes are the ones that we want to look at in detail. The first ones, these are just, one or two scriptures that's going to give us those. But on the beginning of the woes, starting at the fifth trumpet, that's when it's going to get extremely detailed on Revelation 9. Revelation 9 gives us a very, very vivid picture of how it's going to be for 5 months. That's going to be a very chaotic time right after the day of the Lord. And whoever isn't sealed is going to be in danger in that time. That's why it talks about the pouring out of the power and the sealing of the saints at that time. So that when that event happens, the saints are actually, in a sense, basically guarded. Because what's going to happen after the 5 months, that's when the beast comes. After the 5 months is finished, which it actually is described as a time that, that's pretty much, it's like hell on earth, pretty much, except for the ones who are sealed. Now, after that, no one can die during the 5 months, and then all of a sudden, 1/3 of the world died. Once that happens, that's at the sixth trumpet. At the sixth trumpet, which is the second woe, right? The first one was the first woe, which is the fifth trumpet. And then the sixth trumpet is actually going to be the moment where first 1/3 of the world died. Because previously in that 5 months, no one was able to die. What's also important to know is that this one actually continues on for 42 months. That's important to know. This one continues on for 42 months. Now, do the people die at the start? Do 1/3 die at the start, or do they die throughout the whole thing? They probably die at the start, most likely, because the way that is read is in Revelation 9. The way it's read as a whole event that just occurs really quickly. And what's also interesting, this 42-month mark right here, this 42-month mark, we actually get a couple different things that happen. Before that happens, the woman is taken to the wilderness, right? We get the saying where it says in Revelation 12, the woman fled into the wilderness, into her place where it's prepared of God, that they should feed her there for basically, long story short, 42 months, which that time and a half. And what's also important, it lets us know it's from the face of the serpent. That's what's very important, because the Satan is going to be cast down around this time. Now, it goes into deep depth on how that's processed. It's not just because a lot of people, they say, oh, Satan was cast out already. But the thing is, we got to look at what the scripture says concerning Satan, that it's going to be a time he's going to be completely shut out. And he's going to know his time is short when that happens. He's going to know his time is short. And that's why he's going to persecute the people on the earth. And then he's going to give his power to the beast. And he's going to be seen. It's going to be, the way that he's described is as that old serpent, which means the serpent that Adam and Eve seen. So it's going to be the time is not going to be like how it is now. It's going to be a whole nother world. It's kind of like, let's say a last ditch attempt. Let's say someone knows their life is over with. They're going to get life no matter what. And they're like, I'm going to rob this bank at a last ditch attempt. That's basically going all out, guns blazing. That's kind of like what Satan is going to do there. He's going to say, going out guns blazing, pretty much. And that's pretty much what we see here. We also know that that's what's happening, because once the woman's taken into the wilderness, it says, and the dragon was wrath with the woman and went to make war. That's important to note, that he went to make war with the remnant of her seed, right? Which kept the commandments of God and had the testimony of Jesus Christ, right? Of Yeshua HaMashiach, right? And if you be Christ, you are Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. So we already know when we look at the precepts, first there's going to be Israel gathered, then there's others gathered. Those are in multiple different scriptures that says, how it says to the Jew first, then also the Gentile, as the Lord obviously has mercy on all who calls on his name. That's how we see also in Isaiah 56:8, where it says, the Lord God that gathers the outcasts of Israel said, yet will I gather others to him, right? So the woman will be gathered to the wilderness, and then there's going to be come a time of the time and a half. And then whoever is either slain or makes it to the end of that time and a half will be gathered to the Lord. Long story short, in that time and a half, you're going to have the two witnesses there. You're going to have the beast, and you're going to have that temple there, that all these things interact with each other in that time and a half. And then we know after the time and a half, the two witnesses die by the beast at the temple. And once that happens, then they're going to rise back up. Once they rise back up, that's going to be the time where it says the second woe is past and the third woe comes quickly, right? We get that whole saying right here at the end of the two witnesses, right here when they finish their testimony and the beast slays them and everything. And it says the second woe is past and behold, the third woe comes quickly. How fast? A blink of an eye. And that's called what people call the gathering. Some call it the rapture. I don't like calling it rapture because that has a lot of baggage of what's that word I'm looking for? The Left Behind series. We don't want that concept to be understood because that's not actually the biblical concept. That's actually a Hollywood style of idea of revelation. But rather in Revelation is actually going to be a sequence of events so detailed that it's important to understand what's actually going on in the illustration of the book itself, word for word. So when we actually look at the wrath, we know that the wrath, no believer is going to be in the wrath. That's important to know. The wrath is a straight wrath. It's pure wrath. Whoever is on earth is going to receive that wrath. It's one of those things that the Lord actually enters into his temple, closes the doors, and no one can say nothing to him until the wrath is finished, until all the wrath is poured out. Once that's finished, then the Lord comes to the earth. And basically, long story short, the beast is going to be cast into the lake of fire and a false prophet with him, all those that have worshiped the beast. Now, Satan's going to be cast into the bottomless pit. And then after the time, there's going to be a time of the 1,000-year reign, long story short, when the Lord gathers all the people and then he brings them to the place where it's going to be a blessing for 1,000 years. After that time, Satan's going to be released after the 1,000-year reign. Once he's released, he's going to come out and he's going to fool the nations. After he comes out and fool the nations, that's when he's going to be cast into the lake of the fire after Gog and Magog is pretty much sent away. And then there's going to come this great white throne judgment right here. Whoever isn't in the book of life, they're going to be pretty much cast into the lake of fire. But whoever's in the book of life is going to go to the final resurrection, which is actually going to be the new heaven and the new earth, where they're going to be, that's considered the eighth day. That's eternity. That's where they're going to be for eternity. No more pain, no more sorrow, all tears wiped away. This is actually a whole sequence of revelation. So this is obviously a summary, but as clear as it gets of a summary, this is actually what Revelation paints to us that's going to occur. Now, I think Revelation is an interesting book. It's definitely something worth going over. That's why once you understand the sequence of events, you're good. You're all right. Now, if I could, I'm going to actually get my wife, Lily, to actually help me with what I'm going to show following. Now, I did do let me actually close this. I actually did a video on, let me actually leave this open real fast and show this. I was doing a video before on Synthetic Sunday. Now, the Synthetic Sundays, as always, we are saved by grace through faith, as we know this, right? It's all about the spirit, right? We are spirit. We have the spirit of Christ, which his Y chromosome is from the Father, right? But we also are studying genetics. Why? Because genetics actually, believe it or not, has evidence of the Bible in it. That's why I think it's important. I don't study it for any reason but the fact of truth. I want that to be known, that we study this for the fact of truth. Now, it's not our fault if controversies happen, right? In fact, even other geneticists know that controversies happen. The things that they say, controversies happen. Understanding behind the. Now, I want to talk about something real fast. This video, I had a brother that wanted me to dig a little more into the genetics, so we did. And that's what I want to talk about today, because I think it's very interesting what was found in the Americas. Now, what's interesting about the Americas, because at first we only talked about, the Q lineage. We talked about the Q lineage, how it moved over, but there's actually a few different lineages that came over. Dominantly, I would say Q, R, and C. So the main one we're going to look at is that R lineage and how it got over there. Is actually fairly interesting how it got there. And that's what we're going to look at today. But this is what this video was. We just had talked about who was in America before colonization, because I think it's interesting to know history and the truth behind who was in what lands and what actually was going on in the reality of ancient history. Now, the problem about this study I want to talk about is that there is a protection law in the Indian DNA, ancient Indian DNA in America. They're not allowed to dig up ancient DNA bones and find out who was in America and who was here in the ancient peoples. But we can look at modern people and get an idea. But there is something that's very important. The Indians have a Q and a C, which they know those are native, but they also have a R lineage, and that's what we're going to talk about. Now, the thing about the R lineage I want to show you is there's a controversy with it, and we like to talk about controversies because controversies bring clarity to other things that may be aside. And this actually brings some clarity to the scripture, because what we're going to look at is some evidence of the Sea peoples reaching America. That's what we're actually going to look at today, which is actually fairly interesting. Now, when I say Sea peoples, it's the same individuals in the sense of who settled in the land of, I'll just show you real fast. And as always, right, if you be Christ, then you're Abraham's seed. So never take offense if you're any of these haplogroups we look at, whether you're E or R or J and all these things, as I want all individuals of different haplogroups to come together. But I want you to see this, what I'm showing you right here. Okay, so here's going to be some talk about the Sea peoples. All right, now before I start, let me make sure I get. All right. So first, the Sea peoples. Now, what's interesting about the Sea peoples, they're from, you can see right here, Sea peoples behind the Philistines were in Aegean, right? Now, to be precise, they're actually going to be at Crete when we actually get a little more detail on those things and all that, including, now look at this lineage right here, R1b, M269. Now, what's interesting is they say it's your classic European line and whatnot. We can see that in other mentioning and stuff like that and whatnot. Now, what I want to talk about is that this lineage was actually found in not this specific one, but one from the branch of this, and that's what makes it interesting, because let's actually go to this journey. I want to go to this journey and show you something, and I want you to make the choice, because what this actually is, I'm going to show you something that this actually is a mystery. It's your choice to choose. What do you think is the right answer here? Let me just go to the statement that's made. Actually, is right here. Let me see, because I want to let you show. I want to show you this. I want to show you this statement that's made first. Okay, so watch what it says right here. So it talks about RM173. Now, RM173. I'm going to show you something. If you look on the tree, you see right here, we're actually going to look for the R. That's actually different R's. It's RA and RB. We're going to look at RB. RB is right here. This brown one right here. So you can see some branches here. Now, what we see here from this one, M207. Now, this is called a haplogroup. R is haplogroup, and then you're going to have subclads or subclasses. Now, you see this M173. This M173, it breaks off and it makes RA. It makes a RA, and it also makes R1B. It either makes R1A or R1B. But we're going to look at the one as it breaks and goes to R1b, because this one also makes M269. Now, why do we need to find the one with M269? Because M269 right there is also the one that was found in Sidon. Not just Sidon, but it was found in the land of Philistines. Now, it's important to know the story behind how the Philistines got to the land of the Philistines real fast. This is actually interesting because it's biblical information. The Philistines, obviously, these were actually originally Canaanites. They were A-B lineage. We can also find their genetics there, the A and B. But it was invaded. It was later invaded by different people who they call the Sea Peoples, right? They came, they know that their genetics are found in the north. They came from the north and they settled down. They also found in the Aegean, which is actually Greece. They also found in those different areas, and they came down and settled. And what's important to know about them is that it's not just one haplogroup. It's actually multiple haplogroups. That's important to know, that it's not just one group, but it's actually multiple. You got J's, you got T's, you got Q's, you got G's, you got R's. That's, in fact, it was recorded by Ramses that the Sea People was a confederacy. That they all made a confederacy together to come to the lands, and they pretty much took over the Levant and conquered it somewhere around when Israel was coming out of the wilderness, somewhere around there. And they came out and they was basically destroying everything. Now, what's interesting about it, I want to show you. I'm gonna go a little bit down. Just talks about right here. I'm gonna read you this. It says the rare, let me go not too high. Okay. The rare R1b M269 Y chromosome lineage, right? Tells you of this place and whatnot, of Tel Sharad. Offered, it's going to talk about the factors. It says the most relevant clue about the ancestral geographical origin of this Canaanite elite male's parental family, most likely from the Northwest, based on ancient, whatnot. Now you see what I'm showing you here? I want you to understand that it's a connection here. It's a connection. We found the Sea Peoples, and we're seeing their DNA here. And I'm going to show you. It's a very interesting one I'm going to show you here. So remember, that's where we're looking. So from 207, it goes down this way, and it goes to M173. So 207, M173. And from M173, that's when you're going to get your down here, M269. So your M269. So these are all just R classes, just to make it a little clear. So it's going to come from this line, though. And I'm going to show you why this is important when we actually take a look at that. Now, going over here, I want to read you something real fast that was interesting. So I was looking in America, and I was looking at the genetics in America, and this is what I just found. So R1 is very common throughout all of Eurasia, right? It's obviously a lineage that's found in Europe. That's just what it's talking about there. We'll go a little down right here. So it's just talking about, also you'll see R1, R1b, which is R classes. Those are just breaks. It's just that you got such a break that they classify it like that. They separate them, but they're still R lineage. Now I want to read you right here. R1, right, is the second most predominant Y haplotype found among, watch what it says here, indigenous. This is actually going to be, as it says, Amerindians. This actually just talk about, like your natives in the land that's called America, right? After Q. Now that's what we looked at. Remember, we did that live and we talked about Q, and it actually was related to R, right? But we didn't think that we're going to find an R native to that land, because R is actually native to Europe and is actually closely related to the Scythians and different things like that, which we find in the land of Europe. Which is very important to know that that's connected to Japheth, because that's named word for word from Japheth by Flavius Josephus, as saying the Scythians, as we found their DNA in the classic style that Scythians bury themselves in domes. They bury themselves in these, not like pyramids like Egypt does, but they bury themselves in domes. And that's how we know they were the Scythians, because we found a bunch of DNA from them, which we found the YR DNA of R, and we found the female DNA of U, which is actually very interesting because we find that in Carthage, which we're going to talk about too, that U. But let's look at something here. So that R lineage is very important. So I wanted to look at that a little more deeper. So it just talks about it and everything. And then it says this: R1 is very common throughout all Eurasia except East Asia, which is very interesting because East Asia, that's very interesting because East Asia is actually going to be the place where, you know, you got China and stuff like that. But I actually found a slight piece of R in East Asia. Not a lot of people actually know about this, but in East Asia right here, very rare little picture that I had took right here from pretty much what was going on in East Asia. And I found an R1A. Now we're looking at R1B, but this is just R1A, which is far to the east. So we're going to go back down to R1B. Just wanted to note that because that's was fairly interesting. Maybe we should do one on Asia because Asia actually has some interesting private groups as well, like the O's and things like that. Very interesting over there. Go down a little bit right here. Going right here. So now look at the groups that they come from. So R1, now this is actually RB. This is actually R1B. It's going to be M173. Now that's the one, remember we was talking about M173 right there. M173 that also brings M269. So you're going to see right there is going to be your R1B, which is this brown box, which is going to be right there from 173, which brings forth your M269. See what's going on there? Now I'm gonna go back over here. Now watch what came from these different groups. We're gonna look a little more into depth on these groups, especially this one. This is the one we want to take a look at here because this one is actually, it has an interesting history. This one has a very interesting history, and I'm going to show you that history because that history actually is very closely related to the story that the Phoenicians came over and settled in America. Now these ones are actually found in Florida. But we're gonna keep on looking at this. So it's up to you to judge what you think about this. What do you think about this thing that's going on here? Let's go over a little bit more. So remember, I was just talking about that, how I said the R1 is present in that group. You can see right here talking about their names and everything. I'm going to click this one right here. Now, this one's actually very interesting. It just talks about is Native Americans originally from Florida, right? They're originally from Florida and everything. It just talks about some things with them. And of course, we're going to bring out some historical documents on them and all that stuff. So you know that's going to happen. So we're going to bring some information on this certain group here and talk about what's the story about them, because there's a very interesting thing about them. And they have that R lineage in them. This is the group that has that R lineage in them. And we're going to look at that on why such a why so many Indian groups have an R in them. Now, the reason why I wanted to show you real fast, let me see, where is it? I want to show you real fast a statement here. Let me actually go back over here. I want to show you a statement here because it's very interesting on that statement. Let me just make sure this is not the one right here because I know I went back. Okay, right here. So this is a statement I want you to see right here. So RM173, also known as R1, right? Just talks about where it's commonly seen and everything. And then it tells us it's also found in the people in America, right? Following Q, the Q lineage and everything, found in the lands of America. The reason for high levels of, now watch what it says right here. The reasons for high levels of RM173 among Native Americans are a matter of controversy. Now, why is it controversial? One, we're missing an element. What is that element? We can't dig up ancient fossils, but we can't dig up ancient fossils in America, but we can dig it up around America. And that's what I have. That's what I have for you. I have a dig of peoples around America and Mexico, in the Alaskas, to see if there was a connection at the top to track that some, as they say, they went over. If you know that concept, how they say from here, like around Russia and Antarctica, that was a passover, like a passover, where they crossed over. They crossed over from one side to the other. Now, what's interesting about that crossover is that there's evidence that this area was frozen ice. There's evidence that this area was frozen in ice, the same way that we see with a lot of places like Ireland. A lot of these areas were basically cleared together. Over here, this was actually, there was a bridge. There's actually evidence of a bridge that was there by all the algae that's actually underneath the water. There's evidence of ice that had melted recently. What's very interesting about it too is that, let's keep on reading to understand what's this controversy. right? It says the reason for high levels of RM173 among Native Americans are a matter of controversy. Now, what is that controversy? Let's read both of these controversies. Some scholars claim that this is partly or wholly the result of colonial era immigration. Now, what does that mean? Let's talk about basically they would have mixed in with the Indians. It's basically saying that's where it probably would have came from. That our lineage must have came from the mixing in of the natives and the colonials that had came over and colonized the place in a European colonization from Europe, right? From Europe. That's one point. Another, this is the one we're gonna look at because this takes a little more digging into, and that's what we did. We're gonna look into it because I'm gonna show you what it actually says here. It's very interesting. Another authorized points to greater similarities of many RM173 subclads. Right now, that's important because if it was colonization, then they would have similar classes to the European. But in the Indian population, they have this class, the subclass, but it has I'm going to show you what it has. It has some very interesting private breaks in it. So subclads found in North America to those found in, now notice right here, this group. It says North America subclads is more closely related not to the ones in colonization, but to those who came from Russia, pretty much. Let me just show you this on a map so you can see what location they're saying their genetics are linked with. You see right here? They say that their genetics is linked to over here. That's what they say. This is the, where you see right there. How you say that? Siberia right there. You can see this is actually going to be Russia. Siberia. They say that their genetics is actually connected and related to individuals like this. So this is actually going to be proven the migration route that actually was taken over there. So let's look at this. It's very deep, very interesting and very deep to see these things and just get the whole picture of what's going on. Because remember, I talked about this concept. The details of concept is important to understand. And obviously, looking at the genetics is one thing, but also connecting it with the historical things is going to be another. So that's what we're going to do today, connect all these pieces together. So let's keep going and take a look at this. Let me go back over here. So those are going to be the two controversial parts. So we got to see, is it only from colonization? Did our lineage come into the Indians by colonization? It's highly likely, but let's see the great details of those things. Was it something that came there and something that was found there in the natives from a long time ago? Very, very interesting. Because that's why we look at this right here. It says haplogroup RYDNA, right? X1, XR1, and R2, basically R1, R2, was found in, it says 24,000-year-old remains from, you can see where it's right here. Let's take a look at this. Is Russia. See this? And Russia talks about that one in Russia and everything. And it talks about the people that was there. Got this little group here, who they was found in. And that's actually going to let us know that's in Europe. They found it in Europe. But we can't, the thing about America, we can't dig up the ancient people, but we can dig around to see if they're connected. Because the truth is, when they crossed over from America, that's why we did that one live on America, the ones who crossed over reached all the way down. They came up from the top and they reached all the way down. We can follow that throughout the thing. Now let's take a look here. Let's go a little deeper into this. Let's go a little deeper into this thing. So make sure I see where we at right here. We'll go up here. All right, so let's look a little more deeper into the actual genetic factor on it. So I'm going to put something to find here. All right, let's take a look here. So first, let's read the top a little bit. So it just talks about a little bit of what they're doing. Now they talk about, if at first, if someone's not familiar with this, it may seem like code because it's saying haplogroup M3. Now we don't have an M, but that's actually Q M3, right? Just to show that what they're saying, when they say M3, they're saying Q M3 right here. You see that QM3? So they're talking about QM3 when they're saying M3 right there. So it's just making it short. So you can see right here, they're going to be saying the major Native American founding lineage, haplogroup M3 or QM3, accounted for 66% of Y chromosomes and whatnot and all these things, right? Now I'm going to go a little bit down to a statement right here. Okay, so M45 subdivided, right, was subdivided by, basically it talks about this one, M173. Now, M173, this is actually going to be R. This is going to be R1b, M173. This is actually what you're seeing here. And it's letting us know about this sub branch from it and everything and whatnot. It says, which is found throughout, just talks about where it's found and everything. I'm just going to go a little bit down to a part here. Let's go down to a part here and talk about this in a little more detail. Let's go to part down here. So just talking about connecting the pieces, the branches and everything. That's not what we want to see right now. Go a little down. Just talks about different parts. Right here it says the M45 chromosomes harboring the M173 variant were observed only in Native Americans from North and Central America, right? That's very important. The lone exception being, you see this group right here? We're going to look at this group. We're going to look at this group right here too. This is a group that's also, so basically it's saying this R lineage stretched from North and Central America all the way to the top of South America, because just to show, that's why I think maps are always important, just to show you also what this group is. Let's actually go to it on a map. There's a group in South America right here. You can see it would have reached, it would have stretched pretty much, it would have stretched, and we're going to also see it's in Mexico. We're going to see it in Mexico. Very interesting. So right here, it actually stretched from North America coming downwards into South America, to the upper parts of South America. You can find some of their genetics reaching down into these areas, which is fairly interesting. We're going to take a look at that. Close this real fast. So I think those things are very important to take a look at, the details of those things. We go back over here. All right, so from South America, all right, we'll go down a little bit more. Take a look here. All right. These are going to be just right here. It says all M173, which is that R1b lineage, positive M45 chromosomes were found in, now remember how they said they found it in Russia? There's that name again, the Siberian, and these ones right here, and North and Central America natives. So it's connected. It's connected. It's connecting one side of Russia. The genetics found in ancient Russia are also found in that same sub branch, right? Same sub branch in those found in Native America. So it's connecting those two pieces together from a distance. So that's very interesting. That's very interesting to see. Because we also had individuals that said they didn't cross there. They didn't cross up there. But genetics say otherwise. Genetics actually show that we have a piece of ancient genetics and a piece showing in modern genetics, even though we can't dig up ancient genetics of American people in America. That's very important to know, that we cannot get those ancient information. The reason why is fairly interesting, because a lot of people are saying this didn't happen, but this did happen. This did happen, and we can also follow it by the females line, and that's what we're going to look at too. The females line matches too. That's what makes it hermetic, when you see the male and the female line have hermetic things. Let me tell you why we can't dig up ancient digs. All right, so this is just a blogger. He just basically writes about some of these things, and he talks about what happened. He says, then we have the issue. He's just talking about some things why we can't completely connect certain pieces. But today you're going to see those pieces connected by historical and circular genetics. I call it circular genetics because in this sense, I call it a circular genetics because we can't get ancient genetics from America, from Indians. Watch what it says here. Then we have the political issues those involving race, past discrimination or discrimination, and gentle for the actions of our persecutors regarding their racism and whatnot, and all these things. Pretty much what it's saying against the natives and whatnot. It says it also involves an overly sensitive, and he just talks about, that he says the natives are sensitive from it. But really, if you think about it, if you really live through what happened, maybe you won't be that sensitive on some of these topics. Maybe you'll consider the heaviness of some of these things and whatnot. I think it's important just to note some of these things and whatnot, that the mentality after slavery and certain abuses can linger on. I'm gonna actually do a talk of that one day on how those things can affect generations later. Now, as examples of this, now what she's going to say, an example of the past problems that were going on in the lands. It says, as examples of this, I can cite the legal battles at courts as followed by U.S. law. This is the law about the digging of ancient natives, Native American graves protection, and what's that? Repatriation Act, right? Or your NAGPRA, right? Which have removed from further study ancient remains not even distinctly related to, obviously, their tribes. So it's basically saying they can't even dig up fossils of humans and just put the information out there publicly. But it's important to know, of course, people will work around that. There's other workarounds to find these things instead of making a public announcement that we're going to dig up people in America of ancient Indians. That would be a political backfire like this world's not seen. So it's also important to know that. Just know that we can't necessarily put out direct information of ancient genetics. And that actually was seal the deal, if we can pull out ancient genetics. But I have today some very interesting information that will link these genetics together in a sense of a hermetic form. So it's very, very interesting to see these things. But first, we're going to also take a look on history and a cultural dive on the people of the land and stuff like that. Now, if you ever heard the theory, there's a theory. Now, it's said to be debunked. We're going to look at that. We're going to look at the theory and see if it is debunked. Because I say by genetics, there's actually an interesting connection to the Phoenician and America, that there's actually evidence of the Phoenicians coming to America. Now, the reason why I say that is because if we look at some of the theories, a lot of them, they basically would debunk some of these things, say, oh, no, they didn't come to America. No, that's the coins. There's no way with the coins. But if you take a look at the coins, they say the coins are fake. But what's interesting about the coins, if you look at the details of the coins, is a map on the coin. This is a real coin that they found. Now they say it's fake. They say it's fake, but underneath here is actually a depiction of the map of the world. And they say this was actually made by the Phoenicians. And they say, oh, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it wasn't. Right here, if you see on this part, it actually has a part of Britain. You can see right here is Spain. This is actually Africa right here. And it has Asia over here. And then it has America. There's America over here, which is actually fairly interesting on this coin. It actually has a design of all these things on this coin. That's what makes it very interesting to see that. Now, I'm going to show you some history first. And I'm going to show you some historical quotes about the Phoenicians too. And it's a connection to a certain Indian group. And it's going to be very interesting to see, I believe. So before we actually do that, let's actually understand a little bit of culture behind Carthage. Now, what's a famous thing that's known with the Phoenicians? Who are the Phoenicians? The Canaanites. What did Canaanites do? I'm going to read you a scripture here because this is a very important piece of culture to find out. What did the Canaanites do, and who did the Canaanites worship? The Canaanites worship Baal. The Canaanites worship Baal, and they also moved to a place called Carthage, the same Phoenicians. Now, I want to show you a video that I think is very interesting to see, but first let me read you something of the scriptures. This is what happened when Israel didn't wipe out the Canaanites, because why did the Canaanites have to die? Because they were doing a thing that was absolutely wicked, which I'm going to show you have evidence of it, that they've been doing it for a long time. Let me just read you the scripture. This is what happened when Israel had fell away during the time of 2 Kings 17, 16 to 17. It says, and they left all the commandments of the Lord their God and made them molten images, right? Even to calves, right? And made a grove, right? A grove is basically a place where they go and worship all the hosts of heaven and served Baal, right? Baal, right? They served Baal. Who worships Baal? The Canaanites. It says, and they caused their sons and their daughters to pass through the fire. What does it mean to pass through the fire? That means they sacrificed their babies, pretty much. They were Israel fell away. A lot of people who deal with the Canaanites, they end up falling away, especially by mingling with them. They end up falling away. That's why the Lord wanted to destroy them, because their culture was wicked and they didn't want to turn from their culture. They were too committed to their culture. It became them. They became one with their culture. And watch what it says right here. It says, and used divination and enchantments and sold themselves to do evil in the sight of the Lord to provoke him to anger. Now, Yah does not like child sacrifice. But I want to show you that when we think about what happened, did the Canaanites stop doing child sacrifice? No, because we can follow them in the time of Carthage, and the Romans were saying that they were doing sacrifice. Now, it's important to know that some people say it wasn't true, but I want to show you first the evidence and let you decide based upon the evidence. Did they still do animal sacrifices, and did they get to America? So I'm going to show you that today. So first, let me mute, and I'm going to show you this evidence first. So Yah willing, this thing stays up because I want you to see this information, as it is just very interesting stuff to go over. And also, this is all going to be, what's the word I'll need to look for? This is just the right of reviewing history. This is all history, non-profit, and what have you.
Carthage has been branded as foreign, decadent, perverted, cruel, and treacherous. Day, Carthage has been branded as foreign, decadent, perverted, cruel, and treacherous. But the worst accusation of them all was that the Carthaginians, as a sacrifice to their gods, burnt their own children alive. Rome was the world's most powerful state. It didn't just win wars, it also knew how to win hearts and minds. It was the Romans who perfected the black arts of vilification and propaganda. Nobody did it better. They set about one of the most concerted smear campaigns in history, painting the Carthaginians as everything the Romans were not. Never mind the fact that the Carthaginians made their home in the Western Mediterranean possible. Just listen to this. People who had no right to call this their home did their job so well that the phrase Punic or Carthaginian faith actually came to mean treacherous behavior. So the very word Punic became an insult. No wonder that the Greek historian Diodorus, writing for a Roman audience, knew exactly what his readership wanted. Just when he thought the Carthaginians couldn't be any worse, he hit them with this. They even incinerate their own children alive to placate the blackest of gods. He wrote, there was in their city a bronze image of Kronos, extending its hands, palms up and sloping towards the ground, so that each of the children, when placed there, rolled down and fell into a gaping pit filled with fire. Roman slurs, like so much of what they built, have lasted for millennia. Diodorus' horror story set the tone for hundreds of years of future visitors, especially those drawn to North Africa in search of just this kind of lurid tale. In 1857, one of France's greatest writers, Gustave Flaubert, arrived in Tunisia. Inspired by the tales of ancient Carthage, his novel Salammbô was born. It's a great read, but it also reinforced the image of the Carthaginians as being sexually perverted religious extremists. In graphic detail, Flaubert describes how screaming children were dragged by their parents to the great statue of the god, where they were burnt alive. It's said that Flaubert lived and worked here in this house, overlooking the Punic ports, right in the heart of ancient Carthage. perfect place to let your imagination run riot. 60 years later, just round the corner from here, archaeologists made a series of chilling discoveries which seemed to give credence to his most sinister ideas. 20,000 of these simple terracotta urns have been found here in Carthage. Even now, I find their contents incredibly moving and unsettling. Inside were miniature pieces of jewelry, the charred bones of animals and birds, and the burnt remains of young children and babies. Was it more than just a case of fevered imagination? Could Flaubert and Diodorus before him have actually been right? Was this the sacrificial site where the Carthaginian gods were appeased with the blood of children? These urns were found with hundreds of engraved stone dedications called stelae. Archaeologists called this place the Tophet. Now, the Tophet was a sacred precinct dedicated to two main gods. And one of them was Tanit, and this is her sign here. And it's an abstract figure of a woman with her arms outstretched. And the other was Baal Hamun, the chief god of Carthage. And here's his sign, and we find this everywhere. And this is the crescent moon, and underneath it the sun. And some people
Shalom family. So look real fast. So you see what you're seeing here? There's just somebody basically holding their arms out like they're looking for a hug. And then you see this moon and this star. That's what you see in the design of the Ottomans. The Ottomans have the same design. And it's also important to know they're also related. The Carthaginians and Ottomans are highly related. They're highly related. It's very important to know that a lot of the culture, the Canaanite culture, had reached a lot of people. We also noted that, remember what other time we was looking at the Star of David and stuff like that, and we found out, what did we find out? Let me actually see where that part is at. We found out something very interesting. Let me actually see what it is while I'm going over. And what did we find out? What is something that we actually found out when we was looking at some of these pieces of information? Let me see right here. Or else I open up a little thing. Let me see. It's probably over here. If not, I probably accidentally closed it, and I'm gonna open it right now. Let me open it for you. Right here. Now, the reason why I'm going to this is because the finds that were found of, let me just double check, make sure I didn't open it in another place. The finds that was found in the ancient lands, where you're gonna see some very interesting things that I think is very important to take note of. Let me actually open it right here. I'm opening it right here. Let me just show you something. Because we were noting before with the Star of David that the Star of David was actually a design that the Phoenicians had, right? And it's actually a design that the ones from the Ottoman Empire had, but the ones from the certain ones from the Beyliks, right? We also see right here that you see that sign right there. You see the design right there, right? We see that this was something that the Canaanites were using right here. And this was something that the Canaanites were using. These are actually two designs that the Canaanites were using, these two designs. But to show you that in the great details of it. So we actually did a whole live on this when we was taking a look at it. But let me open up a note here, right here, right? Because we got one of the ancient evidence of it right here, right? Ishtar actually had that design right here. You can see Ishtar with that design right there, the 6-point star right there. You can see what's going on there. Now let's go down. I'm going to show you something, right? Because I'm gonna need this to look at some relations to these things. So there's Carthage. You see that design right there? We had talked about that before, that this design was found in Carthage. We're gonna also find that this was found in a couple different places, right? You can see that it reached all the way to the lands of America, things like that. Because a lot of people, they would say that, oh, this must be an Israeli design. It's actually not. It actually was a Carthage design, We can find it in Mexico. We can find it in different places of different lands all over. This culture had reached very far. It's very important to understand that this culture right here reached very far. And if you want to see the depth of this, we also did a live on the Star of David to see if that was the Star of David. But we know for a fact that that is actually from the Canaanites. That's actually a design from the Canaanites. But let's go back. Let me close this, and let's go back over here. So you see that moon and the star? I just want to talk about that real fast. Why that looks like that real fast. So let's keep on going with this because it's going to be really interesting. The last piece that it basically comes up to is that it highly seems that the Canaanites had came to America. And they were a people that never gave up when they were fighting with the colonizers. So it's very interesting on these things.
People think he was also the god of fire, which fits perfectly with the idea of babies being incinerated here. Scientific research has shown that many of the urns which contain human remains came from the 4th century. So what happened then that could have provoked an infant holocaust? Well, an invasion by a Sicilian Greek army and an attempted coup d'etat by one of Carthage's own generals had thrown the city into turmoil. And in panic response, according to Diodorus, 500 children from aristocratic families were incinerated alive to appease Carthage's bloodthirsty gods. Some of the engraving on this stele also suggests something sinister was happening here. This is a priest, his right hand raised in supplication, and in his left hand he's cradling a swaddled infant. Was this baby being offered as a sacrificial victim? For many historians and archaeologists who unearthed them have put them back in exactly the same position. Well, the guide suggests that it was here that the babies were set down, ready for sacrifice, and that their innocent young blood would flow down this channel into the pool below. But evidence? There is none. But there is something here that will really disturb you. The Mistral, a wind which blows in from the northwest here, combines with these rocks to create a kind of natural bellows. And this was capable of creating a fire of intense heat. And sure enough, down here, archaeologists found a pile of ash full of burnt babies' bones and a tiny button for an infant's garment. The ash also contained the remains of herbs, such as rosemary and lavender, capable of masking any pungent smell, like burning flesh. Those who've continued to believe
All right, I apologize if that was echoing. What happened to the children or the babies when they died? So they were cremating them. That's why the thing about Canaanites, they didn't bury their dead. They were cremating their dead. They were burning them. They were burning their dead. Also, they were burning people alive, right? Did the Canaanites really sacrifice their children? Let's see. Let's get a little idea and see if the Canaanites were actually really doing that thing that they say they were doing. Now, what does the scripture say? Let's just pull up this is a great place to, look at a couple of different quotes. It says, they build the high places of Baal in order to burn their sons in the fire as whole burnt offering to Baal, as a whole burnt offering to Baal, to burn their children. Something that I had not commanded or spoken of, and that had never even come into my heart. So the Lord said he never wanted them to do that, such a thing, right? That's why he wanted to get rid of the Canaanites that were doing these things and burn these children. And then you can see in another place, Deuteronomy 12 and 31. It just talks about right here. That's what it talks about with the Canaanites. It says right here, the Bible is clear that child sacrifice was a regular feature of the religion of the Canaanites and the surrounding nations. And the surrounding nations were doing this too. They do for their gods, every detestable thing that obviously Yah hates, even burning their sons and daughters in the fire to their gods. You see what there? We can also look at other places when we talk about the star Moloch, and they did these things at different places. It's also about the child sacrifice that they were doing in different places. You can see that all over in the scriptures. All over in the scriptures, they talk about that they were sacrificing babies. Do we also have archaeological evidence? I just showed you a piece of evidence that that person also found the basically in Carthage evidence of burning of babies, right? Burning of babies. Now let's also see some other pieces of evidence that's going on here, right? Let's go over. Let me just close some of these so we're not close some of those. I'm gonna close this too. We don't need that now. Let's take a look at some other evidences. So here's another. This is just something else. It just talks about some finds and stuff like that. All right. So it talks about the ritual things that were going on, the grisly things that were going on in ancient Canaan. It said many scholars think that archaeological discoveries in ancient texts show the possible historicity of the burnt offerings of children in Canaan and Israel. Charred skeletal, and we're going to look at some of these. We're going to see that is actually finds, real finds. Charred skeletons of children. That's what's important to know, that they were burning children. Charred skeletons of children have been discovered together at Gezer, right? Just talks about some places at Megiddo of Palestine, and this one to Tanakh and Megiddo, right? Megiddo, right in the midst of the area where you have the Levant and everything. It's like that area that's talked about where it's going to be war, one of those major areas where you had a lot of battles and stuff there. It says, now watch what it says. Although these skeletons do not have, it says basically, it doesn't seem like it's child sacrifice, but how does child sacrifice look if it's a bunch of children that's basically being destroyed? It says they are similar with hundreds of urns containing the charred remain of children found at Carthage sites. That's what I just showed you, right? They say the ones found in the land of the Canaanites is similar to the ones found in Carthage. See what's going on there? Very, very important to actually see the evidence. Let's actually look and see if there's any like physical evidence. Now, what's important is to see if they had a culture of doing that. Is there any evidence of them doing that in America? Yes. Study of the largest child mass sacrifice in Americas revealed chilling new details. See what's going on there? Scientists have discovered grisly, chilling evidence of the largest known mass sacrifice of children in the history of the New World. 140 young boys and girls in a single unspeakable event. So it's very, very crazy what's going on with these things. So you can see as she talks about the evidence, and I'm gonna show you where exactly it is. Basically, let me I'm gonna see if I can click this. Actually, I'll copy it right here. And as always, it's always good to get like location information. But it really like gives a little bit to there. Let me just make sure this is gonna give me that spot. This one is okay, but it's not. Let me actually copy something else. See at the. I'm gonna open this in another tab to see if this will show me the place. It's very, 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 very heavy. But it's basically is. Let me make sure I get the exact place because I want to show you that because it actually is in Natural Geographic. You see right here? Maybe Natural Geographic give me the word for word exact on these things. Peru. All right, so Peru. All right. Probably familiar where that is. Just I guess for visual. We should probably show that just for that sake. Which I think that was that one. I just wanted to make sure and everything. I want to zoom out. I want to have a zoomed out map, but just to show that on a larger map. I might open up a large map. So right here, you can see right here, this is South America right there. So you're gonna see we got evidence. Now remember, we had seen that some of them from here reached all the way over here. So we got evidence of these things happening all the way over here. So very, 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 very interesting to see these things happening so close, right? Very, very crazy. So it just talks about that 500 years ago. It actually talks about a lot of these happened around the year 1492 and stuff like that, because you're going to see some very interesting things. But what I'm going to show you is some genetics that go far, far back, way far back and stuff like that. But a lot of times, why would they be doing these sacrifices like this? Because they be going to war. We got examples of people when they're fighting each other. They will usually do this when they're fighting each other, when they start to have war. So a lot of colonization, what happened? There was a lot of war. And what would they do when they start to go to war? Start sacrificing a bunch and start doing some crazy things. So just talks about right here. You can see this mass site. These are graves. These are peoples. You can see here. It's a lot of them, and it's not even all of them. So you can see a lot of people between 5 and 14 years old. So between 5 and 14 years old, and they talk about them on there. And it just talks about, and it says, just basically talks about that this one, it looks like, is an ancient culture. It says, and thus may have been viewed as particularly appropriate as messengers or gifts to the gods. You can see what's going on there. So that they sacrificing them to their gods and everything, their idols. Very crazy. So they tell you the year around 1400 to 1450. So some around there. You can see a lot of movement that was going on close to these times. Around these times, you had a lot of movement. People really taking off seas. And remember, not everything's going to be recorded. Not everything's written down. But that's why we have to examine these things and the evidence of it. So it talks about took place in the 15th century. So I wanted to show you that. So let's also see a little bit more. And I'm going to show you history on the Phoenicians and could they have been in the land of America, right? Here's a theory. Ancient Phoenicians were the first to discover the Americas. It's a theory. They say it's a theory. Is there any evidence of these things? Can we go deeper into them? They talk about writings from them and different things like that, all types of levels of evidence, on different things. They talk about the writing. They say the writing is going to be Semitic writing, right? It's important to know that the Phoenicians, it actually says right here, the inscriptions basically allegedly told the story of some Sidon Canaanites who visit the shore of Brazil. This is what it says. This is what they say this stone has on it. They say this stone right here has the writings on it. And they say basically what it tells the story of. It says, because remember, we just seen the evidence of the baby burning in Brazil. And we just seen the evidence of some genetics reaching all the way down to Brazil. Maybe they actually started in Brazil and went up to America. In fact, that's what we're going to look at, all the way up to Florida. So we're actually going to be looking at Brazil from South America to Florida. We're going to be looking at that in some details. It'll be very deep. So right here, this inscription right here on this thing right here, just letting us know. And there's also some other evidence. But let's look at this inscription. All right, it just says a stone tablet that was, it says, with an inscription that was supposed to be of Phoenician origin, appeared in Brazil in the 1870s. The tablet was given, it just says the name and everything, to this person at the museum. He immediately acknowledged the artifact as genuine. He says he immediately acknowledged it as genuine. It says the inspection allegedly, what's that? How you say it? Allegedly, I don't know why I was getting mixed up words. Allegedly told the story of some Sidon Canaanites who visit the shores of Brazil. It was later found that the symbol, and I'm going to show you historical quotes. We're getting deep, but we're going to get onto actual book historical quotes on these things. It was later found that the symbols that appeared on the tablet were basically variations of letters that appeared in different periods over a span of 800 years. It says it was impossible for all the letters to appear on the same tablet at the same time. So the artifact and the inscription were dismissed as fake. But this is the thing. If there were ancient Canaanites that were there, and then another Canaanite group that came there from the time of the Carthage. If you have one ancient Canaanites and a time of Carthage come there, then you're going to have different levels of translation. In fact, watch what they say was written on there. a few new artifacts appeared in the 20th century, a few new ones, which again spiked Phoenician or Semitic discovery theory. It says Bat Creek inscription was one of these artifacts. Cyrus, he talks about this person, an expert in Near Eastern cultures and ancient languages, believed that this tablet was inscribed in Paleo Hebrew. That's what he just said. He said this was scribed in Paleo Hebrew, and he just says basically this is proof that the Semitic people visited the continent prior to Columbus. And he's going to talk about that they must have been there, and that's what we're looking at today. We're looking at the genetics are going to show evidence, and the books are going to show evidence. That's how we look at genetics. We look at the genetics and put these things together, but you're going to see this thing put together in a way without even looking at the ancient people in America, but we can look at the ones around, right? Very, very interesting of these things. It just talks about, he says, some Phoenician sailors visited America around 350 BC, obviously based on the writings and everything. So you can see some older ones, and they have a picture right here. This is a carving of the Phoenician ship. Now, what's interesting is they know this is a Phoenician ship because the style of it and everything. It just talks about that they basically deny this, though. They've denied that this happened because it's too deep. It says most modern day scholars deny the idea that Phoenician, Canaanites, and Carthaginians discovered the Americas first. So obviously, because that's going to throw, how you're going to write that in the books that the Canaanites are the ones that discovered America and all these things like that. But he says, no, archaeological evidence has yet been discovered to prove whatnot. So what we're going to do is look at a very deep book. So this is just some things on these things, the finds and everything. Now let's keep on keeping on. So now we're going to do a little historical review on some individuals. But before we do that, I want to tell you about this people. It's the Seminoles. They call them the Seminoles, or that's more of a byword is what they give them. But we're going to talk about this individual group that ended up settling in Florida. We're going to talk about this individual group that basically came to Florida and settled there, and how did they get there? Where they come from? What's the connection with them with a lot of these things? What's going on here and all these things? Now, before we do that, let me actually make sure, we already talked about some of the evidences of the child sacrifices and all that stuff. Now, who else is known to do child sacrifice? A lot of people in America. A lot of people in ancient America, were doing child sacrifice. The Aztecs, the Inca, the Maya, they was all doing child sacrifice, all of them. Obviously the digs, archaeologists have found remains of 42 children. It talks about that they were pretty much there. And it tells us that result was obviously in the sense of pretty much doing sacrifice, making an offering and everything like that. So they were also doing burnt sacrificing of humans. They were also doing those things. Also, you can see with the Inca, they just talk about it, that they were doing it as well. It says a female child who had died from a blow to the skull and then was discovered. And it says other methods, talking about different sacrifices, different things like that. The way that the Inca was doing it a little different. They weren't doing the burnt offerings. But we can see that with some in the details of how they were doing their burnt offerings and different things like that, sacrificing the children and stuff like that. So they were thinking that they were sacrificing their children, believing that they were bringing it to their idol and everything like that. That was happening in different areas. So we're going to look at some of these things. But before we do, in fact, we just got, that's just obviously an idea. This is a summary. We don't need that now. I'm just going to close some of these things so it's not too confusing. So we already looked at this one, and we took a look at some of those things, and I'm going to close some of these things. And matter of fact, I'm going to leave some of these things here. So if you ever see something that you want, because I'm not making a note of this, I'm just doing a live on this. So if you ever want any of these sources, just let me know, and I'll give you what we find, because most of it is just things that people touched on, but just bringing the whole piece together. We're just going to bring the pieces together on these things. Now let's hear a historical source before we start getting on some female genetics and things like that, and look at how that's also connected with the Y chromosome and stuff like that. So let's see some information first. Now, first I want to show you some history. Before I get you, I'm going to bring out one of the brothers. He has a great, he talks a lot about the Indians, but this one may be a shocker from that these ones may indeed be the Canaanites, but he also talks about it here that they're the Canaanites. So I was going to use some of his sources to give some clarity. So obviously, this is for historical purposes to understand the mystery of who these individuals are and are they actually Canaanites? Are these actually Canaanites? So Seminoles. The reason why I want you to know about the Seminoles, remember we had looked at that. Those are some of the groups that had the. Remember right here. Let me see, where is that? Right up here. Right. The reason why we want to look at that is because these are some of the groups that were known to be in the Americas and whatnot. Let me go up here. Don't want to go too low. So right here, make sure this is the one actually right here in America. So you see the groups that we're going to see here. You see the names right here. We're going to look at this one. Long story short, the reason why is because they are going to be the ones with, as you see, they're going to talk about what they have in them. These are especially have these groups, but they also, because they're 50%, they also have that R lineage. That's what they had. They had that R lineage in them, and we're going to take a look at that. When we take a look at the genetics. Now, let me show you how we know they have the R lineage. So we got them right there mentioned. I'm going to go up a little bit. So right here, you can see what's said right here. R1M173 is found predominantly in North American groups, like all these groups right here, and these ones, right? They call them Seminoles. But the ones in Florida. Now we're going to look at the history of it. So historical purposes, we're going to show this. And so we're going to first see a little bit of history, direct, full story history, and then we're going to get to deep sources, deep book sources, and see what's actually said about them. So first, I want to show you a little history on these individuals. So as always, nonprofit, just want to show you some history on these things. Very, very interesting. Very, very interesting on this thing.
In December of 2006, Hard Rock Inc., a massive international chain of restaurants, hotels, and casinos, was bought out for $965 million. The buyers? The Seminole tribe of Florida. At a press conference, tribal representative Max Osceola Jr. remarked on the purchase pithily. "Our ancestors sold Manhattan for trinkets. Today we begin to buy it back, one hamburger at a time." This development represented a big stride for Native American visibility and autonomy in the modern world. But in truth, the boldness of the Seminoles is nothing new and goes back centuries. In this video, we will tell the story of a brave people who for decades fought against the American advance, becoming the only native tribe to have never surrendered to the United States government. This video was sponsored by World of Tanks for Rent for who at the time were a people now the state's field. To discover the origins of the Seminoles, we must begin in the territory that is now the states of Georgia and Alabama. In the 18th century, this region was home to a loose confederacy of indigenous communities, known today as the Muskogee-speaking Creek peoples, who at the time were a people in transition. As a result of contact with
You know, it would be interesting if you know how the book says, "Didn't I call the Philistines from the land of Crete?" Wouldn't it be interesting if they had reached all the way to America and Crete was actually this Crete right here, the place that they call Crete right here? It's very interesting just to see some of these things and whatnot. But I digress. But understand this group right here is going to be the group that moves to this area, to those things. So obviously, remember, they don't know the ancient history. They don't know the ancient history of who they actually are connected to and all those things because they can't pull up ancient genetics. But remember, there's the idea of the understanding of when the people came over, and we're going to get a detailed understanding on who they are in Pacific. So this is actually going to be the history on how they got here and a couple of things like that. So I'm not going to show the whole thing, but mostly the highlights. So I'm just going to get a little historical understanding on these things real fast.
white settlers, chieftains had begun convincing their people to abandon their old way of life and adopt the European ways. A handful of Creek elites managed to acquire some African slaves and worked them on Indian-owned cotton plantations. While slavery was not a new concept in many Native American communities, permanent chattel slavery based upon skin color and race was definitely something adopted from European practices. Disturbed by what they saw as a total uprooting of their culture and traditions, many Creeks migrated southwards to Florida, aiming to create a new home for themselves away from the perceived corruption of the white man. They were joined by members of other tribes suffering similar social turmoil, as well as a large number of African slaves escaping from both Indian and white servitude. Once home to many powerful indigenous chiefdoms, Florida now stood almost entirely depopulated, following a devastating bout of Old World diseases brought upon them by Spanish explorers in the 1500s. As a result, the Creek refugees and their allies settled the territory with ease. By 1775, this motley band had developed a new identity of their own. The Spanish, who loosely controlled Florida at the time, called these newcomers Cimarron, meaning wild ones or runaways. Over time, this word became corrupted into Seminole. As can be expected, Seminole culture was very similar to the society of their parent tribe, the Muskogee Creeks. Like the Creeks, the Seminoles lived in small, sedentary villages.
All right. So that's just a quick little summary of the things that were going on. So obviously they were a little upper, right around the Mississippi area, moved down into Florida. So this is going to be what they call the Seminoles. Obviously, remember the name got corrupted. What they said they were, that name actually just means the wild ones. But let's get a little more detailed into these things with a historical information on these group directly. So remember, these are called the Seminoles. These ones, the Seminoles. So remember, that's going to be a byword for this group. It's just a group of people that have mingled in that area. So also remember, some of Israel came down there too. So just keep that in mind, that some people were moving down there into that area. As it's also important to know, a lot of the slaves that were brought over were actually Judeans. That's important to know. Now, also important to know, these group that's there already are going to be some of the sea peoples that came over. Now, let's see the historical quotes on them. Are they the Phoenicians? Is there historical confirmation for them to be in the Phoenicians? Yes. So let's see that. Let's see that information today. Let's see that information.
Many believe that the Native Americans had no written record prior to Christopher Columbus. This would make it prehistory, but nothing could be further from the truth.
Artifacts containing what appears to be written language excited great controversy when they were originally discovered. According to the scholarly journal of the Ohio Historical Society, quote, "No subject received more attention or stirred more controversy among archaeologists in the 19th century than the authenticity and presumed meaning of the engraved stone tablets that were periodically recovered from the mounds. Some members of the Ohio Association were among the staunchest defenders of a so-called lost race theory, and many had little doubt that the mound builders were descended from one of the ancient civilizations of Europe or the Middle East, most likely the seafaring Phoenicians of Hebrew or Mediterranean origin. Was the scientific community reacting to these origin ideas? Dr. Stephen Peet may have thought so, and actually charged wanton destruction of the mounds. Whether intentional or not, whether motivated by religious or political agendas or not, modern experts agree that wanton destruction did occur.
The Seminoles of Florida by Minnie Moore Wilson. All right, so in this book, it's going to basically correlate a lot of the information we've already gone before in past videos. So let's just go into it so you can see what I'm talking about. So we go to page 118, relationship to the Aztecs and Eastern tribes. Jave, or Yahweh, or Jawa. Today, the antiquarian may lay aside his musty parchments of antiquity and in the heart of the big Everglades, study the history of an ancient people through living authors. Javeh, Javeh, Jehovah, Jehovah, or Hawa, monotone, yet rhythmical, the brown-faced singers, again, brown-faced singers, chanted the hymn. Over and over again were the words repeated by the Seminole choir, till the word Javeh, mystical and the centuries past, dwelt with the listener. None but a Hebrew scholar would have caught the word with an understanding of its meaning. The occasion was a 4th of July celebration when the retired Reverend W. M. Gray was visiting the Seminole Mission at Immokalee, situated near the western border of the Florida Everglades. The Indians, full of confidence and kindly feeling, had consented to sing, and here appeared the wonderful, yes, startling observation made by Bishop Gray. Javeh is the Hebrew word meaning Yehovah or Hawa, a word held in such awe by the children of Israel, and as claimed by scholars too sacred to pass the lips of a man that even its correct pronunciation is unknown. Alright, so they don't know how it's pronounced. So Hawa, right? There was no V's in ancient Paleo Hebrew. If you go to the letter of the Vav, they have the V today, it was Wa, the sound. Alright? So let's continue. It says, today in the weird fastnesses of the Everglades, a band of wild Indians chant the name of the great Jehovah or Hawa in the Hebrew tongue, a name that is meaningless in its original form to thousands of educated Americans. When questioned by Bishop Gray as to the meaning of the sacred word, the Indian answered, God, white man's God. The question now appeals to the scientist, to the antiquarian, and to the theologian. From whence came the Seminoles' knowledge of the word? From its use in the death of the Everglades, one may work back to the prehistoric ruined temples of Mexico and Yucatan, so similar to those of Egypt. Again, the prehistoric ruined temples of Mexico and Yucatan, so similar to those of Egypt, and thus may find in Seminole speech a language linked to connect the New World with the Old. Is this single word, as verified by Bishop Gray, the keynote to the history and origin of the North American Indian? Continuing, Prescott in his History of Mexico refers to some traditions of the Aztecs as bearing a singular resemblance to those found in the scriptures. More or less, does one start with surprise and awe, as he notes in the Indians of Florida a strict observance of those customs as well as religious beliefs as laid down in the book of Leviticus. Not the least startling, after 34 centuries, do we find the Seminole observing the rigid laws of health as laid down to the children of Israel after the Exodus. With reference to the preservation of health, we find in the scriptures that those affected by disease were separated from the tribe, and as health returned, we read Leviticus 15:13.
Now, just for clarity's sake, the reason why I'm showing this is because it's also important to know there's evidence of the Jews, as remember it showed that the people that were slaves fled into Florida. That's why I showed you that little part on that one video, that the people that were slaves, they went to Florida. That's what we've been studying. We've been knowing that those were actually the Jews, the original ones. But it's also important to know who are these other groups that were there. Who are the other groups that were there? And that's what I'm going to show you today. I want you to see on another part on which this, what group was this? What group that had came down here and settled in these areas? Who was that group that came down here? Let me show you a certain quote here that I think is very interesting, if we can find that. Now, the reason why I want you to see this is because I want you to know that some things are they're more complex than it seems. A lot of these things are very complex, but there's a very interesting understanding once you start to look into these things, and you may end up solving some mysteries that maybe you may have not thought of before. Very interesting stuff to see with some of these things. But let me show you a certain part here.
He had to. No, he.
Let me show you a certain part here if I can find it. That's very interesting.
From the book Israelite and Indian, a parallel in
Let me see where that spot's at.
tribes of the United States.
Sometimes I like to save timestamps, but this one I didn't save a timestamp. But there's one certain part on here that I want you to see that talks about the Phoenicians. And in fact, I think it was even close to that part on where I was at. But let me just make sure as checking here for these things, as I think history is important. Those finds right there and whatnot. Just talk about the names, right? Just talk about the paleo that was written there. Just gonna go and just make sure I didn't fly over it. Right? We talked about that paleo right there. Just going over a little bit. And this one, we looked at some of these people, the individuals. Just going over a little bit more. Is why I usually like saving timestamps. On that part, I just wanted to show you that, but let me show you this other piece. So I think this piece kind of sums it together. But you see, it's a longer video, so I don't want, obviously, to play all of it. But if you want to see this whole thing, I definitely recommend this little video right here to see how deep that goes, the whole story on it. Obviously, use discernment. But let me show you something on here once I find that little spot. It's really interesting on this little find this brother found here. Let's see. I haven't read this is that. That one is kind of it, but not exactly. American. Go over a little bit more. And just making sure, just checking here. So this one is you know, just want to show you that. See where that one is. So not this. Go up a little bit. You know, pretty much it's connecting of the languages, but it's also a certain part. I just want to see exactly what it is, so we don't play this whole thing, but there's one part here. If not, I'll just leave it at that one statement because I really want to move forward to connecting the how you say the females line and get the full picture here. But you see here, just long story short, I'll put this in the description, and if someone wants to, like, because brother said they want to get a little more detailed on the Americas, so we definitely can get into a little more detail on them. And so this is obviously going to have more information, but this brother, I'm not going to, play his whole video. I'm going to let that be on his page, and I'm going to link to his page so you can see these things on how these are connected and whatnot.
It is in this
going back a little bit just to see here if it's anywhere on here. Just taking a look because I don't want to look too much on it, or else I have to play it. Sometimes skipping it don't show every piece. So just for clarity, let's keep on digging. I'm gonna go over here. I'm gonna put this in the description. This is very deep. It goes very deep into it and just talks about the connection, just like that little video he showed with the connection with the Phoenicians and everything. Now, this is actually going to be the route where they crossed over. Some also settled in, as you heard, from Brazil. You also can see that the females line, which we actually can see the evidence of the females line actually going over and settling in these areas and whatnot. We can see that with different results of the females line. So like this is a chart that we're going to look at of the females line. And the main lineages we're going to see there is the A, the B. This is mtDNA, the females line. It's going to be the A, the B, the X, and there's actually going to be one more lineage, A, B, X, And that other lineage is actually going to be on the other over here. So C. So that's very interesting to see some of these things. Now, what's interesting is the Canaanite female line is actually U, which is related with the how you say Cheddar Man and other normal native people to Europe. They are very close to that, and they also have one called U3. They also have a connection to that. So here's just some of their ancient lines and everything of those lineages that I was talking about in this land. So remember, they couldn't pull up ancient genetics of the people in America, but they can pull up the ancient genetics of the people in the lands around, like Mexico and different areas around America, like Canada and stuff like that, all around it. Go over here. Now you can see this is also very interesting. This just has pretty much, talks about the information of the different groups. So this is in South America. So right here is South America, and it's showing you the same ones. Now this one also shows D, because it's actually in the females line is actually going to be C, D, A, B, X. That's what we're going to see actually is native in them. Which we actually can see that all the way to the other side to where Russia is. We can see that all the way in Russia. Now we also see the U, right? It's like how we said, the U is going to be more European. So we see a lot of the European lineage, A, B. We see U, X, C, and D. So a lot of female lines fairly. So you can see these are just going to be the ones over here. Go back over here. So you can see haplogroup U, and then we got U2 and then U5 and then K. We also got some K there. So very interesting. You can see a little bit there on these things. It just talks about U, very old, and it says Eurasia. That's just letting us know in Europe and everything. And it talks about this is who it's going to be there. It says those uncovered in this phase of our study, because this study, let me go back up. This study right here is actually a study on the basically how they call them aboriginals, basically the people of the lineage. They'll say DNA lineages of the Cherokee and stuff like that. So like natives of the land and things like that. Go down a little bit. And they just talk about what they find there, like the genetic lineages of different ones they find in the area and everything. So they talk about here. Now there's one that is described as U6 and then different ones like that and the U lineages. What's interesting about it, I'm just going to go down to one where it talks about here. It just talks about the U type. It says in Europe, where U types today, basically 11%, there's also H's around there. So a lot of the lineages that we see in the people in overseas, very similar, very, very similar. As it says right here, here's that U. U2 was the basically MT signature of a link between liquid links. It says basically Arctic or basically European and modern day Native Americans discovered. It basically says how old is it? 24,000 years ago. That's what they say, right? So 24,000 years ago, they found it. It's just ancient DNA that they found in one of the skeletons. Now, what's interesting about that is that it links them together. It basically links them together in these things. So very, very interesting to see these things basically linking together from one piece of the world to another. So from Russia connecting over to America. So very, very interesting to see that those connections there. Very, very interesting to see those connections. I think it's very interesting. So just wanted to show you that even the females line shows connections in the U's and different things like that, and different lines. We see connections from one side of the world to another. So it's very interesting to see that connection there. Now here, we can also read a little bit here on some things that's said. I'm just going to read what it says here. It says, in our 384 complete sequence, Mexican American mtDNA, right? It just says basically 12, basically 3% are basically African. They call it African, but they got that L3 there, so you got to be careful when you talk about that L3. Those two L3s are actually going to be Eurasian, but they're going to have some of your lineages from Ham and from Shem. And then you have your U lineage. Now they say the U6 is going to be from Africa, and then you have your U4, U5. Those are going to be more of your Middle Eastern and K. And then it tells us right here, the majority, basically 320 of the group of 384 are of Native American ancestry, which is very similar to previous reports. So it just lets us know that they found others with some more lineages, not just your, because if you look up, what are the Native American, female DNA, that's why we have to always dig deeper than just, typing it down and just having it from the first page and whatnot, but actually digging deeper into what are the native genetics there. What are the native genetics there? So that's why you have to look at the whole picture to get the full picture of what's being said there. So right here, those are going to be the native ones, A, B, C, D, right? X. Those are the native ones. Those are the native ones that are the easier ones to find. There's harder ones to find that they also have that's what these are right here. So this is on a report right here called Large Scale Mitochondria Sequencing in Mexican Americans suggests the reappraisal of Native American origins. So you see what's going on there? So basically, like I said, they can't look in the area of America. They can't look at ancient genetics in America, but they can pull up ancient genetics in Mexico, where it's also fairly connected to individuals of America. So that's also important. So they pull up ancient genetics of people in Mexico, and they actually found out that they're related as well. They're related. Now, when I say Mexico, obviously understanding the natives of that land, when we think about the ones that we know, right? A, B, these are going to be your mtDNA, A, B, C, D of your MT, and then your X lineage right there. And then they also talk about, these ones as well, these ones that they also find here as well. So very interesting when connecting some of these pieces and seeing how that all connects on the tree. Very, very interesting to see those things. Now, let me go over a little bit. Now, the reason why I wanted to talk about that is because we can relate the culture. The cultures are very similar. If we look at Carthage, we can see that they had something like that in Carthage. We can also look at the Mayans, right? What they have in the area of the Mayans. Did they have something similar? Yes. In the Mayans area, they had something very similar to that in 700 CE. Something that they found a day of 700 CE was basically looks like the star of, they call it the Star of David, but we know that's actually the Phoenicians' design. That's actually the Phoenicians' design. So they have evidence of finds in that area and different connections on those things. Very, very interesting when noting these things. Very interesting when noting these things, that those are things from Carthage, right? Those are things that were found in Carthage, 5th century BC. Designs found overseas. So very, very interesting. Now, the reason why I wanted to show you this, because now we're at this endpoint. Now I want to come to a conclusion on these things. Let's go back over here. So when looking at the history, when looking at the female genetics, when looking at some of the things that are said about these things, we come to a very interesting conclusion. When understanding these things, in fact, I'm going to go right down and talk about this conclusion here. Go down right here and talk about this conclusion. In fact, let me make sure I also copy something here. This one is good too. So all M173. Remember we talked about that M173. So from here, this box right here, and we also note M207, M173, right? That's the one that makes M269, because that's the one that we find in the Canaanites in the area that had moved around, right? Obviously not the native Canaanites, but the ones who they call the sea peoples and everything that has settled in that area. Let's go over here. Let me not go too much over, because these are just your, like I said, your ancient DNA and stuff like that. We already looked at those in the females line. Now we're going to get back to the males line to get an understanding on what we're seeing. Ham, Shem, and Japheth. So, right, we're seeing a lineage of Japheth, but we're going to see what's going on in its full entirety here on these things. Go down a little bit. Just going to go to a certain part here. I want to read one more part before I go to the direct bottom. Just looking for a certain name here. Found Snag All All right, right there. That's the one I want. All right, just going to read this real fast. So it just talks about, where it talks about the M173 variant. It says, and was found basically in these groups and everything from the Native Americans. You can see what's going on there, a little understanding. I'm going to go down to the conclusion. Went past it. All right. In conclusion, all right, so here's in conclusion. There appears to be a shrinking correspondence, right? A shrinking correspondence between Siberian and Native American Y chromosome and mtDNA. That's why we looked at both of those. mtDNA haplogroup distribution, right? And hence, they must have been associated during, watch what it says here, the transbergene, how you say this? That's a very, I forget how you fully say that. Let my wife bring her in so that we can have this conversation on these things. What's that? Bergien? Beringen? I want to make sure that I'm not butchering that word, Beringen. I don't probably butchering that word. But this migration is the migration. Now, if you're familiar with it, right? This Bergien. Let me show you something real fast on this one real fast. Let me see if I can find that thing. Let me show you. So right here, there it is. Beringian or Beringia right there. It's because at first it was like ice and it was all connected. That's what they're talking about here. They're talking about this event that had happened here. They're saying that there's actually a major connection between these groups. And what's also interesting here, let's finish reading there. So it says right here, migration, the results strongly suggest that both males and females came to the New World in at least two. Now, this is what makes it important, because it wasn't just one wave, it was two waves, and at least two, right? Two coherent waves of migration. The first arising in southern middle, you can see right here, obviously coming from this area, from the area of where you see from Russia, pretty much, long story short. And the second arrives later from southern this area. So they say it also came from this area. Two migrations that had happened. Now, what's interesting about these migrations is that we have a couple different groups in them. So that's why I wanted to show you this, because we can't look at the ancient genetics of America. But now, just for those who are hungry to know a little bit more on those people in America, right? The Y chromosomes that's there, right? It's going to be your C and your R and your Q. That's what it's going to be mainly. Your C, your R, and your Q. And also it tells us like some of them came from different areas, France and stuff like that, and whatnot. Got some connections from different areas and different things like that. But let's look a little more over here. Let's look more into this real fast. Let me talk about this, because this is actually where it gets fairly interesting. So when we think about genetics, we have to also look at the subclasses. So M173, seeing that some from the lands of America has this lineage, but also I'm going to go back from this. So remember, I read you that conclusion. Let's go back. The reason why I wanted to show you that, because what did we start with today? I wanted to let you know that there is these two right here, controversial matters, right? Some scholars claim that this is partly or wholly the result of colonization, pretty much. Basically, the mixing of Europeans with the Indians. Some people believe it's only that. And others, as a deeper study, as you saw there, it basically shows, it says others authorize point, other authors or authorized authorities basically points to the greater similarity of many R and M173 subclass found in North America to those found in basically Russia. So it's basically saying because the connection of Russia rather than the ones who colonized America, which are more closer to Spain and England, right? The ones more closer to Spain and England having a certain lineage, but they get into ones from Russia being more closely related to each other. This actually brings it to a sense that they suggest that this is also an individual, that these individuals came from a long time ago. Basically saying these are going to be individuals from a long time ago, from those ones from past. So the connection with the Phoenicians with these is highly probable. Now I'm gonna play one more video. I want to play one more video that basically summarizes it all in this little video. So I guess I'll end it with a video summary of these things on one note. So I'm gonna play this on a video summary because that's what we was looking at here. These very interesting genetics. How did they get there? Did they come overseas? Some of them may have come over. Some of them may have settled here. Some of them may have came over and settled in these areas. They may have come this way or this way or this way. We have a lot of examples of people coming from different areas. So obviously, looking at these genetics as a whole, right? Very, very rare to see natives with R. That's the reason why that's a controversial thing, because when we say rare, not that it's rare, but it's one of those things where it makes you sit and think. Like, is it actually from colonization? Is it just because it's actually there for a long time? It's very interesting to think about and talk about. Very interesting to think about and talk about, to go over. But let me show you something now on a very interesting video that an individual had made. That talks about, did the Phoenicians come over? Did they settle in America? Very interesting that this individual made here. So this one, this one just talks about Carthage, what color were they and everything. I'm not going to play this one, but it's very interesting if you want to look more into the Carthage and who they were and all that stuff. That's why I'm showing you that they were actually mixed. We don't have to look at that because we already looked at the evidence that Carthage is actually a mingled company. They was very mixed. That's why you see R's and T's and J's and different things like that in them and whatnot. But now let me show you this one, because this is something else. This let me see if it's this individual that actually does it. I think he actually re-uploads it. But there is a very interesting video right here that I think you should see. This is very interesting to know. Let me just make sure this is the one. Okay, so right here, let me just click this one because this one may be more so the channel. All right, so that's part one. I just want to make sure. So part one, part two, and whatnot. Yup.
Before the video.
Now I want to show you this because what this person pretty much illustrates here is very interesting. So just for the consideration, I'll just put this as in the sense of to consider, if it's something to consider based on the genetics. It does show evidence. We also see different writings that show that they can be very the person. But so this is going to be a picture of it all being put together in a way. So very interesting to see. I'll put this here.
The Carthaginians originally came from Phoenicia, located on the coast of the eastern part of the Mediterranean Sea. They founded their city of Carthage as colonists around the 8th century BC. When their capital Tyre fell to the Babylonian king, I dare you to pronounce his name, Carthage became the last great sovereign city of the Phoenicians, and they inherited all remaining colonies on the North African and Iberian coasts, and some of the Mediterranean islands. Already in the 13th century BC, the Phoenicians began their reputation as renowned and very skilled seafarers. They became rich from trading high-value goods like ivory, gold, silver, and so on. The Carthaginians proudly followed up on their Phoenician heritage of being traders and skilled seafarers. Carthage was located in modern-day Tunisia near the capital Tunis. Carthage had two beautiful harbors, an inner and outer. Her location was excellent for sea-going trade, and she prospered. With supposedly 60 ships to explore and colonize the Atlantic coast of Africa. Hanno's exploration of the Atlantic coast of Africa is still, however, debated as to where exactly Hanno's exploration got him to. Historians consider three places that he could have reached. Historians agree that he at least got as far as Senegal, because his records of his journey stated he found hippos in an estuary of a river he thought to look like the Nile. That river was probably the river Senegal. The second place is Guinea, because Hanno's account of his journey mentioned a large mountain, and Guinea's 890-meter Mount Kakulima could fit his description. However, some historians say his description of the mountain better fits Mount Cameroon, which is 4,040 meters, so it would be more notable to put it in his records if he saw this mountain. That the Carthaginians traded with the native population of sub-Saharan Africa is shown in the accounts of the Greek historian Herodotus. I will now quote his account on how the Carthaginians exactly did their trade with these native peoples. Quote, "The Carthaginians tell us that they trade with a race of men who live in a part of Libya beyond the Pillars of Heracles. On reaching this country, they unload their goods, arrange them tidily along the beach, and then returning to their boats, raise a smoke. Seeing the smoke, the natives come down to the beach, place on the ground a certain quantity of gold in exchange for the goods, and go off again to a distance. The Carthaginians then come ashore and take a look at the gold, and if they think it presents a fair price for their wares, they collect it and go away. If, on the other hand, it seems too little, they go back aboard and wait, and the natives come and add to the gold until they are satisfied. There is perfect honesty on both sides. The Carthaginians never touch the gold until it equals in value what they have offered for sale, and the natives never touch the goods until the gold has been taken away. So the fact that the Carthaginians were able to sail to the West African coast and return safely made historians think they could have gone much further than previously thought. There is an even more interesting account from Pliny the Elder, who was a Roman author, naturalist, and natural philosopher. His account stated that Hanno actually managed to circumnavigate the African continent, all the way from Gades, which is now modern-day Cadiz, to Arabia. I hope you enjoyed part 1 of this video. Leave a like if you Before the video starts, I'd like to advise you that this is part 2 of this video series, so I recommend. Also, according to accepted history, China was not known to the West until the Roman Empire, yet genuine silk threads have been found on ancient Egyptian mummies too, proving that contact was more far-reaching and far older than previously thought. The Phoenicians were known to navigate by the stars, and in fact the Romans called the North Star the Punic Star, because of its use by the Phoenicians for navigation, but the Romans did not understand how it all worked. Another navigation tool, called the gnomon, was used to determine the latitude by the position of the sun, agreeing the user to determine latitude as well as direction. Furthermore, some instances of clouds, the flights of birds, and even the way waves form far from land. A short passage from the Greek book Argonautica described the man who was to be the navigator for the fictional voyage as follows, quote, "Typhus, son of Hagnias, left the Scythian people of the Thespians, well skilled to foretell the rising wave on the broad sea, and well skilled to infer from sun and star the stormy winds and the time for sailing." The islands of the Canaries, located off the coast of northwestern Africa, have stone ruins, the most imposing being a number of stepped pyramidal structures located right in the middle of a town. Farther out in the Atlantic, the Azores have turned up with a hoard of Carthaginian coins, a statue of the horse of Carthage, and a number of pottery fragments that could be Punic. Along the Atlantic seaboard of the Americas, a number of stone monuments have been found, usually inscribed in Punic, and many have the name of Hanno. Oddly, in northeastern Pennsylvania, near the town of Hawley, one of these stone monuments was found, inscribed in Punic, which stated, "This monument, placed by Hanno, do not defice."
So obviously, when it's talk about Hanno, that's most likely for the sake of understanding Hannibal, and that's also important to know. That was one of the major people that the Romans didn't like. That was a major problem that they were having with Hannibal. So it's showing them that there's evidence of him reaching all the way to America.
Even some universities are now saying that the Phoenician seafarers may have been trafficking the entire coast of Africa and the coast of India as early as 1500 to 1200 BC. The alphabets of India, Ceylon, and Sumatra all originated from Phoenician. This could again be evidence of far-ranging contact. Inscriptions on stone are found throughout the Americas, and coins of Carthage have been found in a number of states. Nearly all have been found close to navigable waters, and oddly, all are of the earliest issues of Carthage. None later than the First Punic War have turned up. Even a metal urn with Phoenician themes and likely a Carthaginian trade item was unearthed near the junction of the Shenango and Susquehanna rivers in New York. When divers went to investigate the odd stone formation of Bimini Island, near Florida, they found a shipwreck that dated to the 1800s. While searching, they found that it lay atop an older shipwreck, one that is positively Phoenician and dates to approximately 1000 BC. Dr. J. Manson Valentine of Yale University confirmed the origins of the wreck. Let me know what you think about this evidence in the comments below, and if you think that Phoenicians really reached as far as the Americas. And don't forget to subscribe for more history-related videos.
All right, so just for a summary today. Now, this is why when we did that live the other time, I just want to make it understood. So just this is a deeper dig on it. Obviously, for the sake of understanding, the reason why I want to give this information is because I just want to give the understanding of what's going on in different areas, right? The ancient genetics and who they are and everything. So obviously, when we had looked at this, we went into Q, and now getting the full picture of the R and everything, and who's all there, even the mtDNA. So I wanted to make it fair of talking about those things, as I didn't want to make obviously a big thing about it. It's more of just interesting. It's interesting to know. But for those that it may imply, it's good to dig deeper into these things because you never know what you'll find. So are they Phoenicians? Is genetics show is very it definitely can be. Definitely can be is definitely something that is very interesting to see. So very closely related genetically, and even when we look at those ones who settled in the land of Florida, so they have some links with the ones who have pretty much connections to Phoenician connections. So very, very interesting. So this one, I'm gonna put this one in the description because I actually wanted to show a piece on this, but I'm not sure where it is, and I don't want to play the whole thing. So this is definitely something that's really interesting because it talks about these people, the Seminoles. Very interesting to see when talking about them and everything. So they talk about how they came overseas. Now remember, a lot of the Phoenicians and Canaanites, they end up also having what's the word I'm looking for? Union sometimes with Israel. So it's possible for some to leave their religion, right? All Canaanites aren't going to always serve their idol. Not all Israelites will all serve their God. So sometimes you'll have people switch over, but hopefully, Israel always stay on their Lord. And, the Canaanites turn from their wicked practices and turn to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So I just want to show you that. I just want to show you how it has a link to the old world and the new world and everything on those things and what's going on with these people and whatnot. So very, very interesting when seeing these things and what's said about these ones individually. So very, very interesting. So I'm going to close this. Actually, I'll leave this just in case I need to put that somewhere. So as always, this information is provided freely to ensure that individuals who are hungry for information also can receive those things when seeking these things. So my conclusion on these things is that I'm not going to say who they are, but I would definitely say there is a R lineage that is found in America that seems to be native. That seems to be native from a native wave. It definitely seems like it had came to America a long time ago, which is that RM173. So very interesting when seeing those things. Very, very interesting when seeing those things. So could it be part of mixing? Could be part of mixing. Who knows? But all we know is that this large group, right? This large group of Indians of different group, when they say Indians, natives to the land, or in a sense native after coming over, as you say, or the first visitors to the land, the first visitors of America. Obviously, you're going to see some as they call Indians or North Americans, right? Native. So just wanted to talk about that. C, right? Y chromosome C, and I mean Y DNA C, Y haplogroup C, and we also see R, and we see their major Q. They're majorly Q. So Q and R is actually related. Q and R is actually one. So and that's in that video of the ones in America. So I just want to have that information there, as I think it's always interesting to study these things and see where it leads. So the reason why I want to show you this, it was a mystery. We don't know because we can't dig up the ones in America to put a final stamp on it and say surely these are Canaanites. So we can't put a stamp on it. But the people around the land, the Y DNAs of the females and the Y DNAs of the males and the Y DNA of the females, it definitely shows that they are people that came overseas. That's without a doubt. That they weren't a people that originally happened in America. In fact, no one is originally from the far out lands. Rather, they all migrated. All the people when Ham, Shem, and Japheth, when Noah landed on Mount Ararat, that was it. They was all in the Middle East and they spread out from there. Now, pre-flood, there's evidence of pre-flood people to that time, because we also know, remember, that was a time apparently the world was all one piece, and we have evidence of people long time ago being in America before the people got to America. People who we don't have their lineages to. People pre-flood people. So very interesting on seeing those things. So I just wanted to show you this thing, as we did find ancient people having our lineages and things like that, closely related to the ones that's also found in the Indians, right next to where that crossover is, where they cross from Russia to where you have the upper Americas, pretty much, where you see area going down into Canada and stuff like that, from Alaska, Canada, America, whatnot. So with that, family, I just wanted to basically touch on those things to get a full picture of it. It's what I would say, something that I won't put my stamp on it and say surely those are Canaanites, that the people that actually are mixed with Canaanites, but they do have the lineage of those that were Canaanites. They do have the lineage of those that actually are connected to those. When I say Canaanites, the sea people. See how complex this is? You got to understand the sea peoples and understand the complexity of those who came to America. So very interesting. So very, very interesting. We know the sea peoples are M269, and the ones in America are going to be that R branch, which also brings forth those lineages. So very interesting for those things. So just wanted to show that. And with that, family, If there's anything you see that you want, I'll definitely give you those things. I'll put this video in the description after this thing. So I'll put this in the description. Otherwise, anything that you've seen, let me know and we'll put that there. They're not hard to find, but I just wanted to go over those things live. So with that, be blessed, be beloved, and amen, family.